Okay, hello. Today we're just preparing to go out into the forest tomorrow morning. So I'm just looking through some of the tools we have left for work. We haven't been using them for a while, so they need cleaning and sharpening and all that. But while we're doing that, we're going to take a look at some of them so that you can see the differences in different countries here. So when I lived in Papua New Guinea, we used to use these ones. This is your standard machete. It's actually made in Brazil by Trementina. Um, they're made out of a very thin layer of steel and then cut out into the right shape, sharpened and so on. The handle is made out of one piece of wood which is put over the steel end and then with three fixings driven through it. These are quite good for use in the forest. I have no complaints. I used them for 6 years and everything was fine. But they're quite light, so they're good for cutting your way through the forest. But they're not so great when you're actually trying to cut down a tree. The other thing is these sharpening stones, the standard kind of sandstones that we get here, don't really do a great job of sharpening them. So unless you have a mechanical wheel to sharpen them, these take quite a little bit of time. So they're not really used in Southeast Asia as much as we saw them in Papua New Guinea. This is the local equivalent. So they're not called machetes here, they're called parangs. This is the most common one that you will find in tool shops across Malaysia and other countries here. So it's just a small standard blade, plastic handle, a little ring of copper to keep the handle from cracking when you're working with it. They're quite simple. The biggest differences between this and this machete is that this is a much heavier piece of steel. It's actually a little bit softer as well, so it's easier to sharpen. But because it has extra weight, it's easier to use this to cut down bigger trees. Now this one is a small one and just used for general purpose work. So it's not really meant for cutting down big trees, but you can if you really need to. Now these ones are sold in tool shops everywhere in Malaysia, so they're quite easy to get. But a lot of people make their own. In most cases, they will ask a blacksmith to make the blade for them and then make their own handles. So this is a very simple example. I've used this one before in the forest here. So the simplest possible handle you can have, just a piece of wood that's been carved a little bit to make it a better grip. A small piece of steel that holds the handle together and stops it breaking in this spot where the handle joins the blade. Simple but quite heavy blade again, so very easy to cut with this through bigger things. Not so great for cutting your path through the forest because it's a little bit too short for that. And you see here they have the blacksmith's mark usually, so each one of the blades that we have has usually a blacksmith's mark cut into it. Here's another one, slightly more complicated handle. So a simple straight piece and sticks out a little bit at this bend, so when you're cutting through something, it doesn't go sliding out of your hand. So this is one of the simplest blades that blade shapes that I find here. It's practical, it's just the right size for both cutting your way through something and still heavy enough to cut down a small tree if you need to. Notice how I'm holding the sheath for it. Now these are put together out of two planks and carved out a little bit inside. You usually hold it by the back because occasionally if it's not made well or if something loosens up, they can cut through the bindings on this side and slide your hand, so you don't hold it like this. What else do we have here? Here we have a little decorated blade. The handle is very simple. It's just literally it's the branch of it's the It's a small tree with a branch sticking out of it. It's just been cut off, and so this piece blocks it from flying out of your hand again. Some decorations on the sheath here and here. And this is like a little piece that are often sold for tourists, but they're also used in the forest. This size is not really for work. It's just a small blade that you can use for everyday kind of activities when you're in the forest. So cutting fruit, cutting one or two things out of your way, very small sort of things. And we move on to a bigger and more practical example of the same blade. So you still see the same type of handle. You see a little bit of weaving here from rattan that holds the handle together, and some tree resin that has been used, or in this case I think it was replaced with melted plastic to hold it all together as well. Slightly more carefully carved sheath, and the blade is also slightly bigger. Now these blades, I don't think you can see it, they're a little bit curved at the top and concave on the underside. So when you're cutting something, they actually spring up a little bit and go in the air. So you need to be used to using them if you don't want to hurt yourself. But they're quite strong for cutting down bigger pieces. Another one of this in the same type of handles, slight decorations here on the handle itself. These are typical local designs in Borneo, so you'll see them, quite a lot of them, in various places. You see plastic used here for the wrapping of the handle to hold it together in the weakest point. But these are rattan and some other vines here in the forest. Usually you use one or two pieces, very long ones, and they're just used to hold this sheath together. Again, hold it from underneath. Blade is the standard, same variety as the other one. And one sneaky thing here is normally you put these around your waist and you have to tie the loop. In this case, this little cork has been used so that you can just slide it through here and you can put it on. You don't have to bother tying, it's easier and quicker. Now in this case it was someone's stopgap solution, very quick and easy fix to hold it together. But traditionally a round piece of bone would be used here to hold it together, and a lot more care would be put into decorating every part of the blade. I have a couple more pieces. Now keep in mind, all of these are just tools we use in the forest. They're not meant for anything else, so they don't get too decorational, but this piece is a little bit more decorated. It has nice decorations on the sheath, a little bit of decoration on the handle. The handle is made a little bit more carefully. You can see the weaving again here, this time with wire with plastic covering. This is not woven. This is more of a plastic thing, but overall the effect is quite nice. And the blade is a little bit more decorated, so it has some holes drilled into it, a little line carved out of it as well. They're not really meant to be practical, they're just decorations. This piece of the blade is often filed out just for decorational purposes. And then we move on to a very nicely decorated bird handle parang. So you can see the handle is the shape of a bird head, and you can also see decorations on the sheath. This is made from quite hard, heavy wood. The blade is also quite thick and heavy. It's probably not something we would use every day in the forest, something slightly more decorated. It's heavy enough that you can cut quite a solid tree with this. It's, you know, it kind of plays the role halfway between a machete and an axe. I have just a couple more left here. First one is, this is a long one, long heavy blade. It's a slightly different take on the sheath. And a long heavy blade which is also quite thick, and because it's so long you can use it two-handed to cut through bigger trees. You can actually cut down quite a sizable tree. As you can see, the overarching theme here is either cutting back brush in the forest while you're there or cutting down trees. So usually you will cut down all the trees that are not the ones you're trying to grow. So keep the fruit trees and clear anything else that grows around them. And the last blade we have for today is one that I had to get made for myself, because most of these knives, the handles are a little bit small. So I'm a little bit bigger than most people here. So my handle, my hand is a little bit too big. It's not very comfortable for me to use most of these. So at some point I became a little bit tired of using them, and we went to a blacksmith, and the blade is quite traditional in shape. It's just a little bit longer and wider than the standard shape, so maybe from here on it's just extended a little bit for me. And you can see that the handle is now the same size as my hand, and I've carved a little bit of this handle into a bird head as well, although my carving is not as good as the local carvers here, but it serves its function. It has some steel wire as well wrapped around this part to hold it in place so that it doesn't break up when you're chopping something heavy, especially when you're chopping down a tree or something like that. You might be working for half an hour or however long. The blade is usually fixed with tree resin, and these days sometimes people cheat a little bit and they use the type of glue which is used in glue guns, and you put a few chips of it in the handle and then you heat up the blade and just sink it into the handle. I think that's all the blades that I had, and my son asked me to discuss this as well. This is a very traditional Malaysian implement. It's a stick for whacking street dogs when you go out of your house and want to walk around the neighborhood. Usually you don't need to whack them, just raise it over your hand and they go away. That's it. Thank you.